We're talking international free agents on today's edition of the Call Up. Of course, that is headlined by Roki Sasaki, but we've got a few other names to discuss, players who are expected to be posted and come over to MLB this offseason. Vast majority of the conversation will be around Roki Sasaki, but again, we've got some other fun names to discuss and players that, will get big league deals most likely, and I think we'll have some intrigue. Jack, I know that the focus, as we've said, is going to be the probably 20 minutes or so at least on Sasaki, but we got some conversation around Hye-seong Kim. I'm gonna make that mistake so many times. Hye-seong Kim, Tomoyuki Sugano.
I would think Sugano, like an SH, but there's no H in there, so
And then
could be Sugano, could be Shugano.
I want you to go for the next one, the next name.
I think it's Shinnosuke Ogasawara.
Yeah, you nailed that.
Okay,
And then this next one, Kyle Hart.
I've got that one. Yeah, that one's pretty.
I always want to practice the names before, just just out of respect to someone whose name is consistently mispronounced. But then by the time the lights go on and I'm ready to record, pronunciations I freeze, man. I just become a mental. I just shrink. I just absolutely shrink. So, Roki Sasaki, easy to do. I think we'll be good. I think I'll be able to get through these names consistently as we get more reps with them. But we got all pitchers except for Kim, who's an infielder. No relation to Hye-seong Kim. Hye-seong Kim, Hye-seong. We'll talk about him, but of course, we got to start with Roki Sasaki, who's, we teased it briefly ahead of the conversation that we had with Tamar Johnson and Carson Williams. Definitely go check that out if you haven't seen that yet. Two awesome dudes and two great prospects, obviously. But we kind of said, hey, we're going to save some time for just to be able to fully lay out the Sasaki situation. So I figure we can give kind of a TLDR on the posting situation. I know we talked about it in depth on the Just Baseball show, and by now I think a lot of people probably already have a pretty general understanding for it. You're the expert on that. Let's rehash that very quickly, and then we can talk about the larger conversation of, who is Roki Sasaki and, what can people expect? Because I think, the more time that we've had here, the more buzz there is. It's like, oh, don't fully put him into a Dodgers uniform just yet, which I know you've been very adamant about. I have been on the other side of he's a Dodger. But, a few more reports here and there are saying, hey, let's wait and see. I think the fact that he's going to get the same amount potentially from just about anybody makes it a little bit more wide open. And that's where the floor is yours, Jack.
Yeah, so it is going to be interesting to see how all of this unfolds with Roki Sasaki. The gist that we laid out on the Just Baseball show, so if you're hearing this again, I apologize, but I'll try to make it succinct, is Roki Sasaki is not signing like Hye-seong Kim will sign, or like Jung-Hoo Lee signed, or like Yoshinobu Yamamoto signed. Roki Sasaki is signing like Shohei Ohtani signed. And by that, I mean he's going to make the MLB minimum for his first 3 years in Major League Baseball, and he's going to go into arbitration for his next 3 years in Major League Baseball. So treat him like a true rookie instead of a guy that's coming over on a $300 million deal or on a 4-year, $51 million deal. He is going to have to make, I don't feel bad for him, $750,000 for the next 3 years. So he will go through the arbitration process and the pre-arb process a lot like Shohei Ohtani did, because he's coming over before he turns 25 and he's amassed 6 years in a professional league that is associated with Major League Baseball under a previous CBA. It might have been this past one. It might have been the one before, but there are leagues that are officially recognized around the world, like the KBO and the NPB are two officially recognized leagues by Major League Baseball. So you need to accrue 6 years of service in those or turn 25 years old. He hasn't done either. It doesn't make any sense financially for his team Chiba Lotte to post him, because they're missing out on maybe $40 million or so when it comes to a posting fee. If he signed a $400 million deal, we'd be looking at right about $50 million of a transaction fee, 20% of that. So I mean, or $200 million, you'd be looking at $40 million, right? Because that's the transaction fee or whatever it is. So it is fascinating to see how this is all going to break out. But Roki Sasaki can only sign with teams' IFA bonus pool. So the money that you see allocated to a Jesus Made in Milwaukee or a Brando Maea in New York,
Yeah.
Roki Sasaki's pulling from that pool.
Yeah, which is the fascinating aspect of it, because you expect, especially if he's in the 2025 class, like he's going to pull the vast majority of that money.
Yeah.
And teams already kind of have some handshake agreements with different prospects. I mean, we know that they have verbal agreements with guys when they're like 13. So I mean, we just saw a verbal agreement pulled from somebody that we thought was 14 and turned out to be 19, right? So that whole wrinkle in it is interesting as well. Like there's going to be a bit of a ripple there, but you probably won't even hear about it. There's so much that goes on in the international side in terms of the bonus pool situation. But with Sasaki, the fascinating part is it would have been 2 more years until he could be properly posted in a way that like his team would be able to recoup the money that you alluded to. And that's the fascinating aspect of it. It just seemed like for both parties here, it was just not worth kicking the can down the road any longer. It seemed like Sasaki, since last year, had been very keen on getting out of there. And it seemed like Chibalote just didn't want to have somebody almost feeling like they were holding him hostage for another 2 years. And that's the part that's fascinating, because we're going to talk about like the breakdown of 2023 and 2024, and like some of the ways where he maybe took a little bit of a step back.
Yeah.
But some of that almost makes me wonder. I know he dealt with some shoulder discomfort and things this year. I wonder if some of it was just him holding back, right? His velocity was down 2 miles per hour. It's a guy that doesn't always have the best body language on the mound. And, I wonder if there was just a level of him holding back. So that's the fascinating thing. We're going to get deeper into it. Regardless, we're talking about a player that he's going to be a prospect, I guess. We're going to have to rank this guy, which is crazy too.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, instantly is in, the top pitching prospect in baseball. It's him and Jackson Jobe and Andrew Painter, right? They're all there. And it's really difficult to compare those guys to each other. But, instantly is, a top pitching prospect in the game, and instantly, has frontline upside. But there are some larger conversations to have here. And I'm very fascinated by, a team that acquires him here, a team that signs him. It's going to be different than the Yamamoto and Imanaga situations. I think there's going to be a little bit more development to be had here. And I know that sounds crazy when you look at the numbers and you look at what he's done. I'm not saying that, he needs to change his arsenal significantly or anything like that. I just think there's things that maybe he is a little bit less experience with, that maybe a Yamamoto and an Imanaga were a little bit more comfortable with, whether it be holding on runners. I'll get into that. I think an Arsenal that, the way he executes kind of translating more to the major league side, and just some of the smaller things as well. It's also worth noting that he hasn't pitched more than 130 innings in any NPB season. So, that's another thing in terms of building him up. So anyone that signs him here off of back-to-back years, torn oblique in 23, shoulder discomfort, and a dip in velocity in 24, you have to imagine, especially with the way that this is set up now, where he's going to be making the minimum for 3 years, probably whoever signs him is going to be taking their time with him, and I think be a little bit more careful. So I just, we have phenom being thrown out, and he has phenom talent. But before we get into what makes him so special, because there's so many things that do, I did want to just kind of lead off with, hey, this isn't going to be like a throw him into the fire and expect him to be a dude for you right away kind of thing. I do think that this is going to be a little bit more of a developmental process, than maybe a Yamamoto.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Like, I wonder what the development looks like, because this guy has been, quote unquote, unleashed in the same way that Yamamoto and Imanaga were in Japan. But I'm with you. Like, the numbers are the numbers, but he just turned 23 years old, and you feel like this guy is still kind of learning how to pitch, because when he burst onto the scene, it was really just the fastball that everybody was talking about, and then it was the split that followed suit. Fastball splitter is great. You can't be an elite starter in Major League Baseball with exclusively a fastball and a splitter. You need something else. He's been working on that. He also might have been dealing with the injury bug, or like you're saying, maybe he felt like he's proven all he needed to prove in Japan. So maybe he was holding back a little bit, and he was dealing with that. At the end of the day, this guy's given us 414 innings in the NPB at a 2.02 ERA. It's been awesome. But in terms of him blossoming, like, yeah, I would argue that Spencer Strider's development is not over. I would argue that Paul Skeens' development is not over, versus a guy like Yamamoto. I think you see the finished product of that, and it's just, this is what we're going to see for the next 10 years in Major League Baseball, and enjoy it.
100%. And I think what a team is getting here in Sasaki is uh, a very rare talent that I think is you have to be eager to tinker with a little bit. I mean, if you look at even the pitch charts of a Shota Imanaga, when he came stateside, he started to elevate the fastball way more. And for whatever reason in NPB, that's just not really something that teams like their pitchers should do as much. They don't elevate nearly as much. And if you look at like the density plots, a lot more in the zone with Imanaga. And then now, in the big league, especially when he was going well, really elevating that more and dominating at the top. You saw Yamamoto do some similar things as well. I think with Sasaki, it's going to be a similar adjustment there where it's how do you locate your fastball? Because he's a run and ride guy more than pure ride of the other two. And, when that velocity dips to the 97, 98 range, that run is not as, I think dramatic and sharp and everything. And that's why we saw a little bit more contact in 2024. But I do think with that run and ride, it will play great at the top of the zone in the upper 90s up to 100. And then maybe even getting a separate two-seamer or sinker off of that to get early contact, just be able to go deeper into ball games, things like that. He's just not as much of an executor at this point than I think Yamamoto was or is. And I think that's going to be the fun thing to kind of figure out, like, would a cutter be beneficial as well? Because everything seems to go arm side for him for the most part, besides that slider, and that slider's his weakest pitch. Would a cutter that allows him to go into lefties be helpful? I think there's some other wrinkles and things, because that's the one thing he kind of struggles to establish the glove side because that fastball really runs to the arm side. But what we have here is, I think, one of the more elite and unique two-pitch mixes that you're going to find immediately in Major League Baseball, and really in any level of baseball anywhere, where you have a fastball that you assume, now that he's healthy, can get back up to sitting 99, and then a splitter that, like, I can't emphasize enough how unusual this splitter is for all the right reasons. It breaks like a gyro fastball, but of course it's not going to spin like a gyro fastball. So it has just this vertical drop. The depth on it is ridiculous. And I had this written down. I'm from pitchers at his release height or around his release height. No one sniffs the consistency of the depth and location of the splitter that Sasaki has. So that's the one part of his game that is very, very polished of his arsenal. Only 13 of his splitters had more than 5 inches of IVB last year. So meaning almost every single splitter was below 5 inches of induced vertical break. And you want to be as close to zero as possible with that splitter and make it just drop off the table and let gravity do its thing. He threw hundreds of splitters. And the answer is 500 splitters, and only 13 of them had more than 5 inches of induced vertical break. So we're talking about a guy that is so consistently feeling that split and locating it on the bottom part of the zone and getting that depth. Like, he's rarely having a splitter get firm on him, where that's something that we actually did see at points with Yamamoto. The difference is Yamamoto had the cutter and the fastball execution and the sweeper and everything else. But in terms of splitter execution, Sasaki's up there with just about anybody. It's just the rest of the arsenal coming along.
So this might sound like a dumb question, but like where you're at in terms of induced vertical break on that split with Sasaki, that feels like a lot in terms of a splitter, because the numbers, like what most sliders will still have a positive IVB. Is that right? Like
usually slightly, yeah.
The pitches with a negative IVB are typically just downer curveballs.
Yeah.
And
or like a gyro slider. Yeah.
And the split's getting close to that.
Yeah. It's really like hovering at zero.
Are there other splitters that get anywhere close to that? I wouldn't think so.
On a scatter plot, it's in its own realm. And that's why he's so unique and so special, where it's like those two pitches, the fastball and that splitter. That's why I was thinking about floor, right? And I think I was texting you like, okay, there's more reliever risk here maybe than a Yamamoto, but if he's a reliever, he's one of the best relievers in the game.
Yeah.
So what's the risk then? Like, even then, if you're an elite reliever, that's better than, a back end starter. That's just not going to happen. It's either frontline starter or it's elite reliever. So that's the unique aspect of this thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, to answer your question, it's unparalleled in terms of the shape and what it does. And that combination where you have the fastball getting the run and ride, it's just like a scatter plot that you just don't see.
Yeah.
And that's what I think makes him so unique and fun. And I think has teams probably so excited to see what they can do and tinker with, because I mean, if you can find something that works a little bit better horizontally the other way, whether it's a shorter cutter, a sharper slider, whatever it may be, I mean, that could unlock a lot for him. So I imagine that's why the development side is going to be such a fun aspect of, where he wants to go and the intrigue there.
I know you threw Joan Duran out when we were talking about like, hey, what would the, worst case scenario be for Roki Sasaki? Worst case scenario, obviously, is he's out of the league. But in terms of like, hey, it doesn't go well, he's not a frontline starter. Well, he's Joan Duran. Does Bautista make any sense? Bautista's splitter plays off of his fastball in a way that I feel like is unparalleled in Major League Baseball. But I know Felix Bautista's fastball is one of those classic like vert machines, and that's just a straight ride guy. I feel like Sasaki's fastball right now doesn't profile anywhere near as well as Felix Bautista's.
Not like that. Yeah, I guess not, because he's a starter though, and like the thing is, you put Sasaki in 1 to 2 inning spurts, he's probably throwing 102, right? Yeah. So maybe he's not getting the extension, the vert of a Bautista, but if it's 101, 102, it's going to be playing similarly. But yeah, that's the thing with Bautista, is a little bit more of that vert machine. What's fascinating with Sasaki is, usually when you switch from the KBO ball to a Major League Baseball, you're going to lose around generally like 2 inches of vert. And if you look at, Imanaga and Yamamoto, that's kind of what happened.
Which feels like a lot.
I know, it is kind of crazy. And the concern is that Sasaki also lost 2 inches of vert last year, this past season, dealing with this shoulder discomfort. And that's the one thing, like seeing the velocity drop 2 ticks and then seeing the vert drop, by 2 inches, it makes sense that the fastball went from, allowing I think it was an OPS in like the mid 500s again, or like high 500s against his fastball, to, OPS in, the mid 700s this year, and, contact rates that jumped up. So that's the one thing, is like just interesting to monitor. But even then, I still think with the run and ride, he can get ground balls and work around that. But just seeing how his fastball shape is affected by the Major League Baseball is going to be fascinating, because he's a run and ride guy. Yeah. It's trended weird over the last year, but that's something that, again, you get the right, people around him, pitch lab, go from there, see what it all looks like. I think the most imperative thing here is not as much the fastball shape as it is finding that breaking ball, because the splitter is going to be elite, like and consistently dominant, and then you just need another pitch, I think, for hitters to respect. I think that was the challenge for him this year, where he commanded the splitter just as well as he normally does, but the strike rate went down because hitters were spitting on it. Like anything that started, I think bottom of the zone, they were leaving. And, I think when he has something that also can work horizontally, and then maybe a depthy curveball as well, that can really make it difficult for hitters to have such a clear game plan like they had this year. So I think this is an opportunity for a team to really flex their developmental muscles on a player that you don't see this kind of talent, right? And obviously health is going to be the big thing, and how much that he can get built up. Mm-hmm. But I think there's also a clear aspect of, hey, if that fastball is at 96, 97, it's not playing as well. It plays more like a, plus pitch versus a plus pitch that it was before. So that's the other thing to monitor.
Yeah. And my, last thing that I'm curious about is like, how healthy are you, man? Mm-hmm. I mean, we don't know. And like, you look at the numbers, obviously 111 innings at a 2.35 ERA is awesome, but let's compare that to his previous 2 years, right? His age 20 season in 2022, when he threw 129 in the third innings, and then 2023 when he missed some time, but threw 91 innings. 22, he had a 2.02 ERA. 2023, in those 91 innings, he had a 1.78 ERA. And you look at 24 compared to 22 and 23, batting average against is up, whip is up, Ks per nine is down 1.5 to even 3 strikeouts. Like, he was at 13.5 strikeouts per nine in his 91 innings in 2023. He was down to 10.5 per nine, and walks are up too. So like, everything trended in the opposite direction. I remember the initial reports in the spring and early summertime on Sasaki were general arm fatigue. Like, it was very, very guarded. I saw MLB Trade Rumors had an article that cited that it was shoulder fatigue and an oblique injury, both of those.
Yeah, it sounds like the oblique was 23, if I'm not mistaken. It was a torn oblique. And then I don't know if that spilled into 24, but then the shoulder affected him in 24. What I noticed too is he went more vertical with his arm angle, right? Like instead, it was a little bit more horizontal before, a little bit more vertical now,
And he
but
still lost vert.
and still lost vert. So to me, that just says it's a guy that just was compensating a little bit. And if this is what he looks like when he's compensating, that's pretty crazy.
It's
But
awesome. Yeah.
it's the importance of just getting him healthy. Obviously, teams are going to do their due diligence, and especially now what we're talking about IFA money, it makes it a lot easier. But if we were talking about open market, this would be a very complex conversation with, I think, we could have medicals really creating a lot of headaches and problems. So from
Carlos
that lens, I'm
Correa
almost glad.
too.
Yeah, I was thinking about it. I'm like, I'm almost glad we don't have to deal with that, and he doesn't have to deal with that. But that's another part of the reason why I do think that it's important to temper the expectations. I know like fantasy players out there listening, I don't think he's going to be unleashed this year for multiple reasons. Like he's going to be out there. Don't worry. Like he's going to be used, but I don't think it's going to be, I know Yamamoto ended up getting hurt, but like the plan was Yamamoto's going to throw every fifth day and be available. Like I think it might be a bit of a buildup for Sasaki, and it might not be all that different even from what we saw from Skeens, where it's like have him throw in the minor leagues, a couple innings at a time, get him going. Because the other wrinkle that I think is important, this guy works slow, very slow. Like that was the one. It was kind of annoying when I was going through all the video. He works very slow, too slow for the pitch clock at this point. So he's an athlete. He'll pick up the tempo, but it's something that you have to adjust to. And I don't believe in the pitch clock it correlating with arm injuries as much. Actually, funny enough, when I just got this shoulder surgery, I asked the doctor because I was like, this thing has been driving me nuts. Can you just tell me that I'm right about this? Like, he's like, yeah, I don't buy it either. I don't think there's any evidence to that. So that was nice. But from an oblique perspective and other parts of your body, if you're going, like, you could start to fatigue and things like that. So you do just want to get into, the best shape you possibly can be in physically on every part of your body. But also he's slow as hell to home plate too.
Yeah.
Opponents were 20 since the start of 2023 are 25 for 28 on stolen base attempts with him. He has flashed a quicker slide step to home, but he doesn't use it that often. That's another thing to watch. I mean, the guys are running rampant now in Major League Baseball. So those are two things that I think, very fixable, but, that could really speed him up if they just threw him out into the major leagues right away. So I think there's going to be some slight tweaks with the arsenal, things to work with there, health related things as well, and then holding runners and tempo. Like, again, these are all very, very fixable things, but reasons why I think we should maybe slow down before saying, oh, this guy's going to win Rookie of the Year and, take Major League Baseball by storm right away.
Right. I think it's funny, like this guy coming over with this much fanfare to think he might make a start in like Buffalo, New York in
maybe he doesn't.
Early April.
Maybe I think he should.
I could see it, and I do think that there are going to be some other teams that follow the Skeens type buildup that Pittsburgh just deployed, like you mentioned. I mean, dude, like he was seeing an order one time through. Like it was a month and a half that was incredibly beneficial to Paul Skeens' buildup throughout the entirety of the 24 season. Like he made it to the tape without any issues, and that's a testament to Skeens, obviously, but it's also kind of a testament to the process as well. And we see a lot of guys that are really good at the beginning, and then Luis Heel all of a sudden just has to shut down in August. And it's like, oh, where did Heel go? So I could absolutely see a steady ramp up, and that could be at the big leagues. It's like, hey, Sasaki is going 3 innings and then 3 innings and then 4 innings and then 4 innings, that kind of thing.
Maybe he catches on in spring training so quickly that, it's totally fine. But I do think that's something to monitor that like no one's going to talk about like Sasaki's like time to home plate and things like that, but they will when, runners are running rampant and then also the one thing I did see with him at times, very young pitcher. Obviously I'm watching him, just turned 23, watching him at age 21, 22. Saw a guy that, the innings could snowball on him a little bit. So when and you see the body language kind of go and, if you have the pitch clock and runners going on you and things like that too, then they can really snowball on you. So I think there is just an importance of getting comfortable and things like that. But like once he does, and I think with a tweak here or there, whether it's that depth or curveball, a cutter, I'm really excited to see what, a team will want to do with him. I mean, the talent and everything. I mean, this guy has the upside to being one of the best pitchers in baseball, but at least has the fallback of, being one of the best relievers in baseball. It's a very unique case here that, I think the biggest variable obviously is the health. And, this is probably not a guy that you're going to want to push right away into 130 innings this year either. So that's another reason why I think they are going to probably be a little bit more careful, whoever signs him.
Yeah, so I am 99.9% sure that he's going to be signing after January 15th, which is when the 2025 international free agency officially opens. So you probably won't see him posted until early mid-January, and then there's a 45-day window that follows that where teams can chat with Chiba Lotte. And then after January 15th, Sasaki can sign and he can be paid a bonus as part of, each team's bonus pool. And those range from like $5.5 to $7.5 million. And that's public information that's out there. I know on a couple of sites like The Athletic and ESPN.com, MLB.com, they all have what team's budget is in the 2025 IFA period. When we talked on the Just Baseball show on Sunday night, you were leaning about 90% Dodgers, maybe even higher. I said it feels 50-50, Dodgers versus the field. Based on the information that you've been able to just gather over the course of the last week, has that number changed at all for you? No. Like you saying is you saying no. So you're fully convinced that he's an LA Dodger and he's going to sign up not just for, the bonus that they're going to give him, and it might be 3.5, might be $4.5 million, however much of the pool they want to use, but you also feel like he's going to ID that as the best situation for him to have a fruitful 6 front years in Major League Baseball and enter free agency.
That's the big thing, right? Because the benefit here, I think it's probably dropped to like 80 for me. So I say slight adjustment. Just because there's been enough buzz of it. And like, there's not really a leverage play there, right? Like if he was in the open market, then I'd understand the leverage play of, oh, we're not set on everyone's giving whatever they can out of their IFA pool. So It's not really a leverage play there, with the way we see kind of sometimes media can, work for agents on that front. But, I think when you look at it from this lens, a big reason why Sasaki has given up this money, on the front end, meaning, if he stayed for 2 more years in NPB, then he could hit the open market and, make 200 plus million, whatever it would be, is that he can now hit free agency at 29 years old and recoup that on the back end. That makes it even more imperative to build up your value through these 6 years. Who better to help you do that than the Dodgers, who, are one of the best developmental teams, in baseball, resources wise, one of the best. And also now, have that experience of kind of liaisoning, Japanese players from NPB over to, Major League Baseball. That said, you've brought up other examples of teams that have been able to do that as well. And there's plenty of other, teams that I think, have pitching success. I think about the Red Sox. We talk about, what they can do there. And I think they can make a very compelling pitch to Roki, especially if they're also saying, hey, we're going to go out and, make some trades. This team's going to be serious. And, obviously they've got some brilliant pitching minds there. You could look at some other ball clubs. I mean, I think even the Yankees could have a strong pitch with what they've been able to do and who they are. I think it'd be silly to rule out, some of those other teams that have a lot going for them. But at the same time, it does still seem like the Dodgers is a very difficult opportunity to pass up on.
I think the Dodgers are clear-cut number one. They should be the number one option. And I feel like they are the best in terms of, putting together the best possible pitch. I do think the Boston Red Sox are up there. I think the Cubs can put together a very compelling pitch. I think the Texas Rangers can put together a very compelling pitch. I think the Seattle Mariners can put together a very compelling pitch. And I want to throw San Francisco in there, but right now they don't have the pitching track record. Like Logan Webb is doing this because he is Logan Webb. Kyle Harrison is not bloomed the way that we were hoping he would. And even a guy like Jordan Hicks, he looked so good out of the gates. It was like, oh, it's a giant thing. And that just kind of fizzled out by the end of the year. So those are the teams that I ID: Dodgers, Cubs, Red Sox, Rangers, Mariners. I'll also throw Tampa in there because Tampa is obviously good at the pitching thing and the pitching development thing. But I do feel like the list is greater than one. It's more than just the Dodgers, but it ain't 30. I know all 30 teams want to be convinced, all 30 fan bases want to be convinced that they can make a push for Roki Sasaki, but you can't do it. He's going to choose a good situation, and there are 7 or 8 good situations for a pitcher in Major League Baseball.
I mean, and it's a weird one, but like I'm just even thinking of like what kind of pitch a Houston could make as well with what they could do, and Baltimore even as well. Like there are some teams in there that I do think are good dark horses that could, kind of get themselves involved. But I'm with you. Like, I know all 30 teams technically have a crack. Not really. There's some teams that I just don't think are going to get, much consideration there. But I think it makes it a lot more fun in this respect that, teams aren't immediately priced out of a
Yeah.
Roki Sasaki, and maybe a team that generally doesn't like to spend big or doesn't isn't as comfortable spending big, could have the opportunity to grab him here. Like maybe a Guardians make a compelling pitch.
Maybe a
So
Brewers.
yeah,
Milwaukee could make a case.
so that's the part that makes it a little bit more fun, and I think will make it. I think definitely decreased the Dodgers' chances. I think it's a layup, obviously, if it's open market.
Yeah. Do you think he is weird enough of a release for the Rockies to entertain it, or no?
No, it needs to be lefty, and it needs to be at the waist, I think.
All right, Rocktober delayed until 2027. Whatever.
Why do you think I got my left one fixed right here? I'm getting ready to go. My left arm's going to be throwing soon. I'm going to try to make a case for the Rockies.
Oh, you're in ramp up?
Yeah.
I sent you guys a message in the Just Baseball group. There was an MLB Trade Rumors article that went out yesterday. What, Rich Hill open to pitching in 2025?
Oh, he needs to be a Rocky.
It said open to pitching. He is open to pitching in 2025. I said, so am I.
Yeah.
I'm open to it. You're clearly open to it, getting your left shoulder surgery.
Yeah. He needs to drop it down to I would say horizontal, and then try out for the Rockies. I think
rip the sweeper. Rip it.
We'll have a job waiting for him. We're going to talk about a few more pitchers as well as a hitter in a moment here. We'll go hitter and then the final three arms. But before that, a quick break. All right, our one hitter here, Hye-seong Kim. And Kim is interesting because we don't have as many bats coming over right now. He might be the lone international bat from the Pacific here. And I mean, not the caliber of player of a Jung-Hoo Lee or even a Hye-seong Kim, but I think there's some intrigue here. And you look at the second base position in Major League Baseball. Weirdly, I think a lot of teams could actually use an upgrade there. Yeah. He's very athletic, but I do wonder, how much impact there is here. This is still a fun, athletic, somewhat dynamic player that I think is a great fit for several teams, but I guess I'll just kind of lay out strengths, weaknesses, and then, we can kind of compare just, to some of the other players that have come over recently. So with Hye-seong Kim, definitely has just progressed nicely in the KBO. And I think has turned into a more well-rounded hitter. But at the same time, it's like a lot of the players that will come over from there. It's more hit over power. The difference is, I think offensive profile is similar-ish to a Hye-seong Kim, maybe a little bit more hit and a little bit less power, but he doesn't bring the defensive value that a Hye-seong Kim has. And then a Jung-Hoo Lee, he has just this otherworldly bat-to-ball skill. Maybe the power is comparable. I think actually now Lee all of a sudden's flashed a bit more power. He's a bit bigger frame, a little bit longer levers. And the bat-to-ball is just, again, is as good as anybody you're going to find, from that league and really internationally, period. So a little bit short in those regards. But Kim still posted in-zone contact rate. Hye-seong Kim posted an in-zone contact rate of 91% in KBO. So you figure that can drop to low to mid 80s. That's still above average, even if it does. The EVs were fine. I think some guys end up actually seeing that tick up a little bit with the Major League Baseballs and the Major League velocities. The big thing for me was he was able to handle velocity and sorting through 92 plus. Hye-seong Kim was all over it. And from the left side of the plate, handles left on left pretty well, sprays the ball over the yard. I'd like to see him be more patient. But I think this is most likely a utility type of player, but I think you can hope that there's enough offense here to be that everyday second baseman. I think a big wrinkle in this thing is, can that stolen base ability translate? Because you're kind of looking for those separators in his game. If the hit tool's above average, if the power is below average, you probably want to see that defense and speed be a big part of his game at second base. And I think that's kind of what the selling point will probably be for him.
You lay out the weaknesses as well, and then I'll, kind of fill in with what I see in the stat sheet. But it's tough with these guys. Like Sasaki has just been on everybody's radar for 2 years. It just feels like there was so much more information on all these guys last year. And I will say, we were spoiled rotten by last year's class with Yamamoto and Imanaga and Lee and Yuki Matsui. And there was even more there. Like, that was so good for baseball to have that intrigue last offseason. Kind of feels like it died this year.
Yeah, I feel like that was the class that, I felt like I was almost I was always almost wondering if people are like, oh, well, now that they're going more in depth on the IFA guys, maybe they're getting a little ahead of themselves, and like, especially after Imanaga, I'm like, I think this guy's going to be a 3 starter as well, and you're like, no way, and I'm like, honestly, like they've got it like that. I think the only disappointment was really Woo Suk Go,
Yeah.
Woo Suk Go, but
Usuck go. And
I mean,
maybe Uesawa as
maybe
well, but like,
Iwasawa as well, yeah.
yeah, I guess.
But I mean, those guys probably would be, the names that we talked about right away here. Uh, Kim, I think what I like though is that floor being a little bit higher, where at the very least, like he's gonna grind out ABs, he's gonna run a ton, and you can still move him around the infield. He's not an everyday shortstop, but he could probably plug in there.
Mhm.
The glove looks pretty comfortable and solid, definitely solid at second base. But I think a big part of his game and what's improved is being able to add more extra base hits, kind of get the ball in the air more consistently. He's putting the ball on the ground, far too much the first couple years, and then the last 2 years of his pro career, really getting the ball in the air more consistently, I think has been huge. So he can tap more into that gap to gap and sneaky pull side pop, where I think he can, probably hit 10 home runs or so a year. Another guy that I think it's going to be very important where he's playing, the environment, because it is that sneaky pull side. But if it's somewhere where it's kind of deep to straightaway right field, that power could be suppressed, and there's more of an emphasis on spraying it all over the yard. But he's a guy that's quick out of the box. I had him at like 3.9, anywhere from 3.9 to 4 flat from home to first. And, that's a guy that's going to beat out a lot of, ground balls and stuff like that. But I would say the big weakness is just that I don't know if the hit tool is proficient enough to offset the lack of power. Like the differences with Jung Hoo Lee, you had proficient hit tool, you had elite plate discipline as well.
Yeah.
And then you had flashes of this impact, at least two, where Kim, you're not really getting those flashes of impact. It kind of just is what it is. And the hit tool's good, but the plate discipline's average as well. So I think the other wrinkle would be it'd be pretty important to see him get quite selective if he comes over as well, and kind of just be that see a lot of pitches, grind out the AB, not be afraid of 2 strikes kind of guy.
So last 4 years, I'm looking at the OPS has gone up, each year. The slug is up each year. The K total is down each year, and he's been very, very efficient in the stolen base department each of the last 4 seasons in the KBO with Kiwoom. 46 for 50 in 2021, then 34 for 41 in 22, then 25 for 28 in 23, and then 30 for 36 in 24. So at the very least, it feels like you're getting he probably doesn't burn like David Hamilton burns, but it does kind of feel like you could be getting a David Hamilton here.
Yeah, which would be quite valuable. It's just depending on what you're expecting him to do. We were talking about him as maybe an option for the Mariners at second base and some other teams.
Yeah.
The tough part is, do you count on this guy being able to be an everyday second baseman for you out of the gate? Like we saw the learning curve from a Hye-seong Kim. I think there's going to be a learning curve from a Hye-seong Kim. That learning curve still won't even get him to, I think where we see Hye-seong Kim. So I think from that lens, like if you're signing him, it's more of this expectation in the short term of part-time, bench utility type. And then you hope that, over the course of this several year contract, he, blossoms into more of that everyday second baseman. But I'm just thinking about like the Mariners who just continue to whiff on second base, like probably not your answer, but could be a good option. If you don't land the guys that you want a cheaper addition there, because I don't think he's going to be very expensive. But that's the interesting thing. Do you go like 5 years on a really low AAV, or is it a shorter term deal on a higher AAV? I think going 5-6 years and it's a couple million, a year. I don't know what the deal is going to look like. You can never really get burned on that. And then you have a chance for him to develop into this better player. Whereas if it's a couple year deal, he might just start to be settling in by the time he hits free agency. And that's kind of a weird spot.
I'm thinking in terms of Seattle, like, couldn't they make a play at Gleyber Torres and Hye-seong Kim? That's my thought, where you've got Torres as your everyday second baseman, say he gets hurt or JP Crawford gets hurt. Kim can fill in at short. He can pop in at second base, and he can be a third middle infielder. And you have flexibility there.
One thing, certain days you can DH Glaber because he's not the best defender in the world either, and that's where Kim can then go play second. So still not a bad option. I agree. It's just I guess depends on what the price is and if anybody else is willing to promise him an everyday role, which I don't know what teams. And there might be some rebuilding teams that think that could be a fun spark to kind of
White Sox
throw in there. White Sox. I'm just trying to think like what teams does he kind of fit in with there? It's tough because if you're a contender, you probably want to aim a little bit higher unless you're signing him to be a bench guy. But also, if you're a rebuilding team, you're not really jumping out of your chair to pay a guy $2 million, $3 million, $4 million, whatever it may be, over the course of a deal. So that's where it's interesting.
I don't know. Like I'm trying to think about who would make sense. And, there are some teams that I think could benefit from a cheaper shortstop option, but he's not going to play shortstop for the entirety of the Major League season.
Yeah, it does not seem like it. So that's the tough wrinkle in it. I know MLB trade rumors had him at like 3 years, 24 million. I just think that's
a lot.
It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. I think I'd almost rather go more years and go like 5 years, 30 million. And unlikely to get burned on that.
Yeah.
The Angels makes a lot of sense too, as maybe a placeholder before Christian Moore. And then, Christian Moore's coming off a knee issue. You may want to DH him some, keep him, out of the lineup a little bit. I could see the Angels making a lot of sense, but I really do think ultimately it's a rebuilding team that wants a spark like the White Sox, or eventually just makes sense. Maybe he just settles in with a better team like the Mariners. But I think Angels and White Sox does make a lot of sense.
The Angels is tough though, because Moore could just be ready 2 months into the season, and you've got a guy for 4 or 5 years if you do go the longer and cheaper AAV route, and then you have a guy sitting behind Neto and Christian Moore for the next 5 years. And it's like, do we want that? Do we love it?
They might not care. But didn't they just sign somebody too? Didn't they just sign an infielder?
No, they signed Darno.
Kevin Newman or something.
Kevin Newman for a 1-year deal.
Oh yeah, then that might hurt the chances now.
Yeah, Hye-seong Kim's not an Angel because Kevin Newman is there.
Yeah, I saw it'll be fascinating, but again, I don't think this is a guy that's like fully going to make a major impact right away or anything like that. But definitely a solid player that can instantly be on the 26 man and help.
Yeah.
Next guy, which pitcher you want to go to?
Let's go with the name that's a little bit easier. Tomoyuki Sugano.
I think he's the best of the remaining names, but he's also the oldest.
Yeah.
Did you get to watch? Were you able to like pull up much video on Sugano? I know you got some Kyle Hart video. You sent me some stuff on that.
I think I've seen Kyle Hart throw in person. By the way, like
you definitely have AAA 2023.
No, I wouldn't have actually, because he was in Worcester in 22, and then he was in Tacoma and Lehigh Valley in 23, and we didn't see either of them. So I didn't see Kyle Hart, but I've definitely tuned into some MILB TV games. But Sugano, no, I didn't get to look at any video. I just saw, wait, this guy just turned 35 years old. What's going on here? But
he's 35.
There are occasionally guys like that. Like, do you remember Shogo Akiyama coming over to the Cincinnati Reds? Like, Akiyama came over when he was 32 years old, and it was just quick, and he went back. I think I don't have Akiyama's page. In front of me right now.
Arihara wasn't very young either. Or who else am I thinking of that was there? There were some guys that came over that were older. Junichi Tsuzawa was definitely older.
Tsuzawa was older. Wasn't Koji older when he came over?
That's what I was thinking of. Koji Uehara was definitely older. Those are all relievers, and there's a chance that could be the role with Sugano, but I want to say Sugano because I think that's how I keep reading it, but it's definitely not how you pronounce that in Japan. Sugano. But maybe it is. I always love the comments that kindly correct our pronunciations there.
Yeah.
But with Sugano, like I think five starter depth arm makes the most sense. And I actually really like this would be an arm I'd be excited to sign. As I get excited about these kind of guys. So righty, kitchen sink, will be cheap, can probably eat innings for you. I know you probably have the numbers in front of you. I have some concern about the fastball quality, but he's been able to navigate that and limit the damage in that regard, get a lot of weak fly balls. It's mostly 91, 93, but the slider he commands the heck out of. It's like great horizontal break, almost no vertical, so it really is kind of that short sweeper, and then a cutter that he throws off of that I think is another really good pitch in the upper 80s. He has a decent splitter in the mid 80s, and then that curveball in the upper 70s, and then he'll even mix in a sinker that doesn't have enough depth, but I still think is a fine ground ball pitch to mix in there. So you really got this 6-pitch mix here. Good command of it. I mean, he doesn't walk anybody. And, I think leaning into the sinker side of things would definitely help to get more ground balls. But I love the slider cutter combination with that split that he mixes in. I think he can just massage his way and kitchen sink his way into, being a solid 5-starter. But in shorter spurts, he showed that his velocity can tick up. We saw him at the end of the season go 2 innings and he was touching, 95. And, if he's like a multi-inning reliever as well, like that could be the fallback as well. But I think this is an innings eater for a couple of years here that you could stick in, the back of your rotation. And I think in the right environment as a fly ball, he gets more ground balls, but I think as a guy that does get some fly balls with the fastball, could be, a really successful arm in the right spot.
He's not going to kill you. I mean, this last year was awesome. He was 15-3 with a 1.67 ERA. This guy, 156 and 2/3 innings. You mentioned he doesn't walk anybody. In 157 innings, he walked 16 guys. Like, wow, man, 111 to 16 in the strikeout to walk ratio. So that certainly plays. And the other number that jumps out, 6 homers allowed. He faced 608 guys and he allowed 6 long balls. So it's fascinating to me that he's, 34 years old and he might be a kitchen sink, shit slinger. I don't really care. It's kind of fun. And there are a lot of teams that are starved for 150 innings. He can come over and give you 150 innings.
It's all about whether he can mask the fastball. And we've seen a lot of back end of rotation starters that can mask that fastball by slinging it, like you said, and mixing in that slider cutter. I think upping the usage of the cutter, upping the usage of the sinker, getting more ground balls, leaning into that. And if a team with a good defense, picks him up, I think he can be a guy that just can eat innings in that low 4s ERA and be a solid arm. And you sign him to a couple-year deal and see how it goes. He might be a 1-year deal guy, which even at that point would be even better. We talk about okay, if he's going to get 1 year, $10 million, would you rather see what Sugano can do, or would you rather have Lance Lynn at the same price?
It's tough because I feel like the answer could be Lynn.
It could be Lynn,
but I understand what you're saying. It is a conversation to be had.
Kyle Gibson.
Yeah,
probably Gibson after what he did last year, right?
Could probably Gibson after what he did last year, but I'm thinking, do you want this guy or do you want Kyle Hendricks at this point?
Yeah, man. I mean, that's a no-brainer.
You know what I mean? There are guys like that.
He's kind of between those two, right?
Probably Zach Greinke's still kicking around in the open market. I would take this probably over Greinke at this point.
I mean, there's just a lot of teams that the Brewers, one of the best defenses in Major League Baseball this year, if not the best defense in Major League Baseball. They just need arms. Why would you not just pick this guy up and throw him in the rotation?
Mm-hmm.
At 1 year, $9 million, 1 year, $8 million. I mean, yeah, I agree. Take for granted kind of what guys that are doing it in the big leagues, what they're worth. And I think, they got their options declined because the Cardinals are just trying to go cheap and young. They're probably not going to have a hard time getting, a similar deal to what their options were for. But yeah, I mean, if you can get Sugano for 9 to 11 million, anywhere in that range, why wouldn't a team like the Brewers just stick them right in that rotation and I think have someone that can just solidly give them innings? Are there any other teams that you think are a good fit for a player like that on a 1 or 2 year deal?
On a 1 year deal, don't call me crazy, but the Dodgers could be in that bucket because you have no idea what Bobby Miller is going to be. You're missing Stone for the year. You're missing Sheehan for the year. You're missing River Ryan for the year. The 5 could end up being a guy like this or a Robleski. And what do you want to do? They have World Series aspirations. I think there are a lot of teams that are just looking for starting rotation depth. So I do Milwaukee, that's a name that totally jumps out. Cleveland, man, Cleveland could be very interested in this kind of thing. Detroit could be interested in this kind of thing.
I think Cleveland, with what they've been able to do with their arms too, as well. This is a guy that, again, I think tinkering with the usage and things like that could definitely, open up a lot. Him in Detroit, I think, would be a great situation as well. And then, it's the same Red Sox conversation as well. I think could be a good fit there. Blue Jays, we're very excited to add Of course, I'm drawing a blank now.
Yariel Rodriguez.
Yariel Rodriguez kind of could have a similar opportunity here. And try to, but that staff is old, so I don't know. But then remember too, like whoever signs this guy, if he's throwing pretty well and your team isn't great, you can always flip him at the deadline as well. So that is another fun wrinkle in this thing too. So I mean he's the best of the arms that we're gonna talk about here, but we still got two more.
Shinnosuke Ogasawara. Let me try that again. Shinnosuke Ogasawara. There we go. 27-year-old, just turned 27 years old. His last year, 144 innings at a 3.12 ERA. He walked 22 guys in 144 innings. Problem is he only K'd 82. It's 5 strikeouts per night. What's the pitch arsenal breakdown of this guy? Because he has never been a guy that has struck out anybody, it seems.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. It's fastball that he throws way more than you would expect because it's 90 miles per hour. But fastball, changeup, curveball, slider. It's short guy.
Is it stock?
It's I wouldn't say it's stock. Like I think there's some funkiness to the release. The fastball changeup combination is kind of wild where, I think there's some release components to it that I think make it kind of unique, but it is wild like that at 9, 8. I mean, the last several starts, he was sitting 88, 89 of the season. That is a guy that wants to make the leap. I'd imagine that he's a minor league deal guy, and kind of a project in that regard. But another guy that could be a depth arm off of the changeup and fastball combination. He's 5'11". He's kind of stocky, and I'm just surprised there's not a little bit more velo in there. Is that a guy that you put in shorter spurts and hope that it ticks up a little bit? Maybe, but then like that stuff in shorter spurts isn't great either. It's a unique spot, and I would have thought that the release height would be a little bit lower. It's not, so it's just it's a tough read for me. I don't really know if he's going to be able to command a major league deal here, but he does seem to just create enough deception and get some decent chase on the fastball, and then the changeup works off of it.
If I'm not mistaken, I'm watching a video right now. I think he throws like a spiked curveball. So I think he knuckles the index and he spikes it like that. So that could create a little bit more tumble than your typical curveball, I guess. But even then, like that just kind of seems like the only outlier thing. He is like a stocky, strong built guy, but he's shorter and he kind of operates like he's a smaller guy on the mound.
Yeah, I'm trying to find like how the IVB may compare to some others because it seems like he does get some good carry from behind it. But again, we talk about it,
he's very overhead.
You don't always know how guys are going to translate in that regard to the major leagues, and generally you're going to lose some of that vert. That's why having the low release height is going to tend to be a little bit more beneficial. But if you look at like in terms of vert, he does get a good amount of vert. So the difference though is Imanaga gets similar vert from a much lower release height. So it is above average carry, like well above average carry. And it especially even still from like a 5'9" release height. So I think that's the thing. He does have that going for him. And I think maybe that's what they're hoping. Like, a team will see the induced vertical break that he creates and, the change up off of that and say, hey, like we can maybe tinker with this and find something. But even getting that big time IVB at 89 to 91 is going to be hard to consistently get outs that way. So he does have that. That's probably the one most unique thing. And then you imagine the spike curveball off of that when you're getting that kind of carry helps as does the changeup, but it's going to probably be tough.
Yeah.
But one more name as well. I also wanted to just dig up how his stuff compares. I think in terms of like carry, it's not too far off from like the 18, 19 inches of vert. So again, it's solid, but you probably want a little bit more velo there.
Yeah.
Last but not least is Kyle Hart. Like we said, he was just in AAA stateside, then had a nice year, going overseas, and now he's ready to come right back.
Yeah, he. I mean, this is a year that like you cannot find in really any other part of his database, whether it's, college ball or minor league ball. Threw 156 innings at a 3.5 between Portland and Pawtucket in 2019. But aside from that, like, this was so far and away his best year. I don't even think it's close. This year with the NC Dinos as a 31-year-old, 157 innings. He went 13-3 with a 2.69 ERA, K'd 10.5 per nine, walked just over 2 hitters per nine. So he was eating innings and he was throwing exceptionally well. This feels a lot like what Eric Fetty did in 2023, and then he came over and succeeded right away in 2024. I think Fetty came with a little bit more pedigree than Kyle Hart. Fetty had gotten chance after chance in the big leagues and it wasn't really working. So that's when he went over to the KBO. But Hart, he did debut with the Red Sox in 2020, 24 hits allowed in 11 innings for the Boston Red Sox. And then before he went over, this guy threw 89 and a third innings at a mid-4s ERA, mostly with Tacoma. So, like, this is a guy that was never really that great in the minor leagues, a career minor league ERA 3.72. But I mean, he wasn't striking the world out. It feels like this was, a big time year. Do you see any difference in like the arsenal from 2023 in Tacoma to 2024 in the KBO?
A little bit. And I think there's some developmental intrigue here too, with just what he's been able to flash. Also, Ogasawara, it's like 19 inches of vert, but if that slips to 17, that obviously would be tough. But maybe he's a guy 27 years old. If he gains a couple ticks, could be something there. But with Hart, he gained a tick on the fastball, which I think was obviously huge.
Yeah.
And then he gets good horizontal separation from the changeup and the slider. So I think you're hoping that there can be enough funk here. But this is a guy that I would love to see. He's 6'5". I would love to see him lean into that cross body, crossfire delivery that we saw, Sean Manaea lean into, that we saw David Peterson lean into, that we've seen, Sean Sullivan succeed so much with. And I know you could just say that for any lefty, but he kind of works towards that way a little bit. So I figured maybe that's something that, the right organization gets their hands on him. They can maybe find that and get him a little bit more comfortable working that way, because the horizontal separation is impressive between that changeup and that slider. So that is a fascinating aspect. I think this is somebody that, like, if I'm signing him, it's with the plan to adjust some things and hope that you unlock something there. But he did go, gain a tick on the fastball. And I think he did just kind of gain more comfort with the entire arsenal. Like last year, really struggled to throw strikes with, I think, the secondaries at points, especially the changeup, only landed at first strike at a 56% clip. Maybe he has more comfort throwing this other baseball, or maybe he found something. But the other side of it was he was much more sinker heavy, and his sinker didn't have great depth. Now he went more four-seamer heavy at a tick higher, and that also set up the rest of his arsenal more. So this is just a guy that I think could benefit from an arm slot change, but clearly took a step in the right direction. And I think has maybe endeared himself enough to a team to, instead of like, okay, this is a guy that's just going to like get claimed on waivers and things like that. This is a guy that you go out and sign with a clear plan for. And I think that part of it could be interesting, especially given that he's a 6'5" lefty that, did have the best year of his professional career.
It's never too late. He turns 32 years old next week. Like,
wow.
I say it's never too late, but like, this is a 32-year-old, and I do like the developmental thing, but at the end of the day, you're 32 years old. Like, when is too late to use the D word? It could be your 32nd birthday. I have no idea. It does make sense as a possible 1-year deal. He could also, like, the numbers alone. Doesn't it kind of seem like a guy that might just like stay in Korea and kill and, make a good living and be beloved? Like, I don't know.
That's the thing, is it might just make more sense that way too. Like, do you want to come back and try this thing again? I think it would take the right pitch. Hey, we love what you did last year, and we think if you adjust your release height a little bit and things like that, your arm angle, you can blossom into a back end of the rotation starter, or like this Brent Herter type of role, whatever it may be. The thing that does stand out to me the most is that, I mean, he had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pitches that he threw 12% or more of the time now, and all of them, pretty consistently for a strike. That cutter even getting mixed in there, the changeup getting a chase rate of like 40%. So like things clicked, but it also could just be the competition that he's facing and things like that as well. So I'm with you. I think it might make sense to just keep dominating out there. But if a team sees something, he does have the, pieces to potentially be someone to tinker with. But yeah, at 32, I don't know how much tinkering there may be here.
Yeah, it's tough.
But that'll do it for this episode. Again, not as loaded of an IFA class. Oh, sorry, we have one more, right?
No, I've got one more thing that I want to add. Just shout out real quick to Josue Briceno, who hit his 10th homer in the Arizona Fall League yesterday.
Yes.
He became the first guy since 2011 with a 10-homer season in the AFL. Do you have any guesses on who that person could be?
Mike Olt.
Yeah, damn. Did you already do this?
Yeah. I was looking at some of the best seasons. I figured it was Mike Olt.
Okay, so yeah, Mike Olt had 13 in 27 games in 2011. I've got some OPS numbers for you. As it stands right now, Briceno is at a 1399 OPS in 24 games. Only OPS over 1,300 in the AFL since Dustin Ackley had a 1339 in 20 games in 2010. It's the highest since Tyler Flowers had a 1433 in 2008. 1,200 OPS season since 2010. Briceno, Jacob Marcy last year, Edouard Julien, Nate Roberts, Jed Jerko, Dustin Ackley, Gleyber Torres, Chris Bryant were in the high 1,100, so they came close. Shout out.
You're not doing a good job of making people want to buy into AFL stats right now. Huh?
No, not at all. But I mean, shout out Josue Briceno, who's having as good of an AFL as we've seen in a very, very long time.
Probably younger than all of those guys were, or at least the vast majority of them.
I would think so. Like the prospects that jumped out in that regard were Chris Bryant, but Bryant was a college guy. Gleyber Torres is probably the other one that jumps out.
And remember, Briceno missed the majority of the year, so he's barely played, really even games period as a professional and hasn't played above low A. So really is impressive regardless, but it is funny hearing, some of the players that end up having those big years. Tyron Lorenzo too. I think they had a combined 9 for 10, him and Briceno, which is wild. So it's exciting for Tigers fans with what's going on out there. And it sounds like it might be an exciting free agency for Tigers fans too. I hope so. But we'll do another AFL check-in next week. We're also going to be talking prospects, most likely the A system that we're checking in on next week as well. We'll continue to fly through these team top prospect lists. As always, thank you for listening. Have a great weekend. Look forward to talking prospects with you next week.